We're here on unceded Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung land and Bunwurrung land today. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I pay deep respect to their elders, past, present, and to the elders of the lands this broadcast reaches. Hi, and welcome to the inaugural Poetry Month Gala. I'm Izzy Roberts-Orr, digital producer of Poetry Month, and your host for tonight. I stand here as a slightly red person and poet, positively brimming with excitement about the lineup we have for you tonight. Tonight's event here at the Wheeler Centre is presented in partnership with Red Room Poetry, who are producing this inaugural Poetry Month here in Australia, here in so-called Australia. There's heaps happening across this month, predominantly online. Although I can just see the few people who are in the room with us tonight too. I say few, I mean many. You're very shadowy though. Thank you so much for being here in person. It's really exciting to see what I can of your faces. So in terms of what's happening this month, there are online workshops for every poet everywhere, live and online showcases that bring you a host of exciting voices, including those that I'm about to introduce to you tonight, and the publication and showcasing of Fair Trade First Nation poetic collaborations, some of whom you'll get to hear from tonight, which I'm really excited about. Every Tuesday, we'll also bring you Madcap Poetic Realness, hosted by Poetry Month lead co-producers Anne-Marie Tefeu and David Stavanger. It's a poetry variety show designed for our times, filled with creative and critical commentary, and even the occasional chicken. We're also publishing a newly commissioned poem, reflection and writing prompt for our 30 and 30 writing competition every day across August, from some of the leading poets, authors, spoken word artists and playwrights across this continent. I want to give a huge shout out right now as well to our Poetry Month co-producers, Anne-Marie Tefeu and David Stavanger, and Red Room Artistic Director Tamron Bennett. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here tonight in person due to the border closures, or restrictions rather, but they're here in spirit and I'm sure they're tuning into the live stream. And hello to everyone who's tuning into the live stream. It's great to have you with us as well. And a shout out to the rest of the team at Red Room, including Amelia, who is here in person, live tweeting. And if you want to join in on the conversation online too, you can using the hashtag Poetry Month hashtag. So we're going to do a bit of a radio technique with the speakers tonight. There's a huge lineup of speakers. So I'm going to kind of front announce the first half of everyone that's coming up tonight, and then in the middle I'll introduce the next kind of batch of readers tonight as well. So I hope you've got your ears primed to hear the bios of the incredible speakers who are going to be up shortly on this stage. First up, we have Ren Alessandra, who is in her age of expansion. I don't fully know what that is, but it sounds amazing and I want one too. As the 2020 Australian Poetry Slam champion, she holds her endeavour close. She's a poet and educator based in Melbourne, and she runs her own venture, Wordcraft, blending her vocations to help writers overcome their blocks and develop their craft. Next up, after Ren, we'll have some of our Fair Trade poets. That's a program that's been created by Red Room Poetry, co-producer of Poetry Month, Anne-Marie Tefeu, and it invites some of the world's leading First Nations poets to weave words across lands and seas, gathering collaborative threads and shining a light on First Nations poetry from Australia and across the globe. It's a groundbreaking collaborative project and a joy to witness the generosity of craft and spirit that has been captured in these collaborative poems. They're truly beautiful and very special. And I wanted to share some of the words that Annie had about this as well. She said, "Reciprocity beats at the heart of fair trade, collaborating to write other worlds." So those poets that you'll hear from first up will be Tony Birch, who is a prolific writer that I feel needs no introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. He's the author of a range of different novels and winner of so many different prizes. And notably, he's recently released 2 books, which you can purchase after tonight's event if you're here in person. And if you're joining us online, then why not order it on the internet? Whisper Songs, which is his new poetry collection that he'll be reading from one poem from tonight, as well as the Fair Trade piece, and a new short story collection, dark as last night. Tony Birch is also an activist, historian, and essayist. He has a great Instagram presence, and I wanted to share a little quote from his first book of poetry, which was published with Cordite in 2016, Broken Teeth, which is just about what poetry is and can do, I feel. He said, "Any dictatorship worth its violent salt executes the poets first. It is the way it should be, as a great poem cuts through the crap and goes for the heart and heat like a double-barreled shotgun." Ain't that the truth? And then after Tony, we'll hear from his collaborator, Simón Ortiz, who was a leading figure in the Native American literary renaissance that emerged in the 1960s. Simón has published many books of poetry, short fiction, and non-fiction. And in general, his writing is concerned with modern man's alienation from others, from himself, and from his environment, urging humanity to reconnect to the wisdom of ancestral spirits and with Mother Earth. He's a stunning writer, and I can't wait for you to see his video tonight as he joins us from far away across the seas. After Simón, you'll hear from Thuy, whose debut collection of poetry, Turbulence, is really sexy, frankly, and was published by Whiu in 2020. University of Western Australia Press. Her poetry has appeared in a range of online and print publications. The list is long. And I also want to make note of Thuy's incredible generosity as a critic. She's someone who I feel like in our literary scene is very, very generous with her reading of other people's work as well. And her work shows that, I feel. So you'll see a bit of that tonight as well. And then after Thuy, we have Grace Tame, 2021 Australian of the Year. Now, most people know who Grace is and about Grace's story, but I feel like you might not have known that she's a poet. And we're really excited to share with you the poem that she's written tonight, Hard Pressed, which is about her experience with, she clarified, not all, but some of the Australian media. And yeah, I'm looking forward to you hearing that. Someone tweeted just the other day, I think it was Nigel Featherstone, saying this is the first time they'd seen an Australian of the Year share their own poetry. So we're really excited that she's one of our poetry ambassadors for Poetry Month this year. And then following Grace, you'll hear from Walter Kadiki. Walter is a master of weaving signed poetry and visual vernacular into poetic performance. He's known for his profound and engaging signed poetry and storytelling that bridges cultures and is accessible to deaf and hearing audiences. He really is a master of his craft and performance, and I'm so excited that we get to see him perform for us tonight. He's also a talented at workshop delivery and has done that across Australia in deaf slam poetry and has worked with community groups to create poems such as Butterfly Hands, which was performed at Federation Square in Melbourne and in Geelong. That's it for our first set, so to speak, and then I'll introduce the other incredible poets that we have for you tonight a little bit later on. Thanks again so much for joining us. Please give them all a warm welcome.
Wow, hello everyone. I can't believe that I'm up here. I've wanted to stand up here since I was a teenager, so thank you so much for bearing witness to this very important night for me, and thank you so much to Red Room for inviting me to be here. Well, tonight I want to share with you two of my poems from my little chapbook that I self-published recently, and one of them is one of the poems that won me the Australian Championship this last year. Content warning, as we do on the slam stage. This is about women's period, but I'm not sorry about that, so this is for us. It's titled New Moon. I am bleeding on a new moon. This body senses a fresh intimacy I have with my ideas of myself. This blood, fertile and messy by nature, is striking a match within me. In line with her phases, I clean myself in the shower. Scarlet spread, streaking in raspberry droplets down my thighs, pooling at my feet. There is no repulsion at my body. There is no unwelcome pain. This is my time. I stand clean in front of mirrors that have watched me my whole life and shimmer in this new light of love. It is with myself that I'm in love. I have removed the piercings from my body, kept the ring in my nose, and I'm surprised to recognize it is more me without them. Their decade-long presence once served me an image I needed. It's now been superseded by my own validation. I trace my hands over my body in appreciation of how far I've come. All senses trace the cavernous indent of my scar. Surgical, historical, monumental, a life of body shame dissolves. I celebrate her, name her Scarlet. Let the scar be, and roll my eyes at the poetry in the moment. I celebrate us. I lay a towel down in bed, free bleeding in my sleep, dumbfounded at how our blood needs a different verb to define her autonomy. Caring for my body, honouring my body, I hold her, wrap my arms around myself and hold me close in a way that I have ached for in every other poem I write, and whisper with quiet tears of relief how I finally love me and shimmer in the explosive knowing. I have been here this whole time. Thank you. This last one is called Power Lines. Thank you so much for having me. From the power lines down memory lane, I recall all the women I have been. The houses look so different from up here. Soaring, I reflect on the way these rooftops seem from the street, how perspective is a kind of hindsight, how time has done its best with everything that it had, how I did my best with all I knew I had at the time. My story begins each day when I wake, so many times, in so many beds, on couches, on floors, next to men I thought I loved, who I swear in moments loved me. From the power lines, I watch flowers shiver in their beds, wine bottles reflect the sun, my cat wandering. All of these houses look the same as I remember, but aren't the same as I remember. Nothing is. Memories, they're these tangible things. They warp like blue tack stretched between fingers, Play-Doh mashed at playtime, liberating, but messy. And these houses and doorways I see are portals into the past versions of the woman I am yet to be. Why is a building named a building if it is already built? Why is a woman named a woman if not to a woo man? Woe, man. Womb, man. Was this house of mine not built for anything more than to serve the other? Language, so inherently destructive, subconsciously constructing the way we see ourselves. From the power lines, I consider my power lines, that perhaps they are here in these leaded strings, stretching from mouth to house, from age to era, all of them ending, stretching into unconscious beginning. These houses house humans that are built for more than language determines. There are predetermined roles and other leaded strings, but they are things that we are reworking. So yes, name me building, for I am, constantly. Thank you.
Sorry for my delay. I thought someone said they were taking the cover off the mic, but you'll have to do it now because I'm going to lick it. Okay. I want to begin by reading a poem from Whisper Songs, Birrarung Billabong. Sitting with your open coffin, thinking and not thinking, I want to be with the world and you. I knock against the grain of the wood and want to know if you remember the day we took the bikes to the river and rode along the bank against the current, willing us home to safety. At the Billabong, we circled sacred water, threw away our shoes and socks, and splashed through tea-stained water and stomped in mud. We were something more than wild boys back then. We were our mother's babies, from her womb, from her waters that broke at morning and set us on our way. You had never been happier, and you led the way, and you told me that we should never leave, that we should stay with the water, and that we should be the water. Your own words nudging me shyly, and with all the love you held in your heart. On our way home, we rode in the darkness below the blood-stained sky above. We were not afraid, not me nor you. Our hair was long and curled and magical, our eyes the richest brown, our skin carried water, and water carried skin. The sounds of the river rushing at the falls, a shared pulse. I understood then that we were never so alive and we would never be again. I stand and bend forward and kiss your cold skin and know that you are not here in this box. You were never here, my brother. You will always be with the water. Thank you. And I want to read the Fair Trade contribution, which is one poem in two parts. Before I start, I do have to say also, firstly, thank you to Ren for your reading. I want to say thank you very much to Red Room Poetry for this incredibly dynamic month of events, which must take so much hard work and so much organisation. I clearly want to thank all the poets and all the workers involved. Workers are also poets. And I want to say thank you particularly to Anita Thuy for finding Simon Ortiz for me again. It took enormous effort to track him down. I hadn't seen Simon for 15 years and I'd given up on the opportunity to work with him again, but Annie persisted. She found him and we were able to make these poems together. So I'm eternally grateful for being able to work with Simon again. So this is a poem in two parts. First part, My Brother Returning to the Creek, which references a poem I'd written for Simon 15 years ago. My mother's house is an empty chair. The rain refuses to visit her roof. Rooms of childhood draw final breaths, and the echo of my true brother falls to silence in the corner of the yard. The only hope for me, stuck with anger, refusing to witness the wounds of me, is to go and be with the water, to walk with my feet bare, my body stripped to bones that carry me. My brother lies in clay and floats with air. He is waiting for a sign of bravery from me. To quietly sit and wait and remember my memories. Accept my fears and call to him and say, I love you, I miss you, forgive me. And the second part references a key trope in Simon's work, The Shadow, which is also about the way that First Nations men exist in the shadows of colonial society. Being shadow. Reading your words, I become obsessed. Simon's shadows, sadness and darkness, men afraid to be with light, with air, men only boys. Know them, be them, skin scoured raw. They drew blood for kin and country. They were packed into boxes, wood beaten with nails, their airless fate sealed. Thank you.
The title. They say it's never too late, the title, to catch up. They say it's never too late. It is true, true. And the poem. Always, us, always, never too late. No second chance, that's the work. Before we know it, today is today, and now is now. For that we are ready as ever was. Fate has no chance, not even for repetition. Never mind, it's too late to be forsaken. Is too soon this time, because trepidation is not circumstance, but a calculation and a need. For we are bound, after all, by kin who seek to be like we are, weary and worn by the time we finish stitching the last or the final lace strand on the pack. We are bound by duty that beholds us commonly together as sisters, brothers, children of children, bound to be loyal with human love, and a bond more everlasting than repetitive, but generous and ready to sing the blues into merriment, that dance our sorrows into tidings glad. This is the moment, then, for tippy-toe gentleness and limber tapping with our toes. This is when poetry invents new smiles and giddiness and overcomes us beyond belief as we surrender happily to smiles upon smiles upon smiles. Dark and silent are memories too, for sure, and for sure is our certainty, for sure and for sure. Thank you. Thuy very much.
Hello, everybody. I am delighted to be here on behalf of Red Room Poetry and the Whiu Centre. I'm going to read two poems, and the first one has been specially commissioned by Red Room Poetry and is called Found Object. Oh, and for those who don't know, my name is Thuy. Found Object. I want someone I can turn into art. Splice him into shapes, assemble him again, slightly askew. I want to impasto his body into thick strokes, lather on the touch, textured wetly. I want to rinse out his eyes, replace with cyan drips from a sharpened nib, pinpointed, deep. I want to baroque him in gold leaf, all fired shimmery, theatre in repose, gilded in heat. I want Pollock impulses, tenderised by sunflowers and water lilies, a soul on virgin canvas, stretch, taut. I want someone I can turn into art, stenciled with precision, and my name, a smeary triumph on the bottom right-hand corner. Thank you. This one is from my collection Turbulence, and it's called History Disrupted. The singer machine, my mother's hands, the bobbin, the pedal, frayed threads on denim. Her eyes, tiny buttons, unseeing beyond metres and metres and metres, just to sew me a clean life of ink and cloistered hallways where dead white males ghost through all ages. Banquo's looking glass, a modern ermine trail of blue tinge pale kings to the last of days. Lest you forget, we own this land. Our father, and his before were here already, carved and divided. So, if you want a patch to seed your hopes, better prick your thumbs, woman, back to the needle, the well. Only from your blood, dust hollowed, husks nourish, your child will fatten. outgrow this box, stealth across barriers, purloin sceptres. And then she will disrupt history. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Grace Tame, coming to you from Nipaluna on the island of Lutruwita, reading my poem Hard Pressed for Poetry Month. The same eyes that fix on us were closed before. The same ears that eavesdrop were shut before. The hounds sniffing for blood now cared not when we were bleeding. All of them, once satisfied by tasteless comments, suddenly hungry for flesh, signalling absolute feelings on second-hand stories they haven't lived. And that's the rub, or lack thereof, a lack of feeling. The unscathed are most scathing, insensitive or just senseless. How funny it is that we call them the press. The untouched, the out of touch, poking and prodding and demanding we put on a show, but expecting us to pay, expecting us to play, saying, be the perfect victim, the expert, the counselor. Tell us about being exploited while we exploit you because you are ours. We need you. We own you. You are sensational. We own.
Hello. Difficult for me to see you all in the dark, all your faces. You might know that it's important for deaf people to see people's faces to make that connection, but anyway, here we go. Maybe this is the first time you've seen a deaf person involved in a poetry gala. So the poem I'm going to sign today is called The Silent Verse. I've got a strong connection with this, and I'm hoping that it'll help you empathise with the deaf world and how we express ourselves, how deaf people think, and how we work things out. So I will sign. You might notice that there's a voice. This is an interpreter translating my signs. But remember that Auslan and English, there's a bit of a delay. So there's two different languages running in parallel at the moment. Auslan is a visual language, and that's how I will express my poem, in a visual manner. And I hope you enjoy my poem tonight. In a land foreign, here I stand. The uneasiness feeling and nervousness caressing me. With condescending uncertainty sincerity. The silent and rapid pounding of my heart. The chilling screams in me. Invisible to the naked eardrums. The naked eardrums that reign with undue supremacy. In a land foreign, where sound stands profound, where poets of yesterday, today, and tomorrow skillfully chant the elements of sound into verse. With my head down and a painful sigh, here I stand. The rhythm, the flow, the intonation, the mysteries. The odes of aching hearts. All woven with the elements of sound to caress those naked eardrums extravagant. In a land foreign, here on this platform tonight I stand, a platform. It's been forged with spoken words and verse, where silence is unknown and eerie. Here I stand, excited, yet apprehensive. I hope you enjoyed it. There should have been 2 poems that I signed, but the poor interpreter, I thought that would just be too much work. And also due to time constraints. Because as you saw, Auslan poems can be quite long as we take our time to sign. But I hope you enjoyed stepping into my world. Thank you and good night.
Next up, we're going to hear from David Stavanger, and I'm going to claim him a little bit. He is my colleague at Red Room Poetry, one of the lead co-producers, along with Anne-Marie Tafew of Poetry Month. He's also an Australian poet, performer, cultural producer, editor, and lapsed psychologist, which I really love that he always puts in his bio. His first full-length poetry collection, The Special, was awarded the Arts Queensland Thomas Shapcott Poetry Prize, which has published a range of really incredible first books by poets from Queensland. And he is also the co-editor, along with Annie, of Solid Air, collected Australian and New Zealand spoken word. And his latest collection, Case Notes, is an incredible book that I highly encourage you to read. Again, buy everyone's books if you're here in person, and if you're joining us on the live stream, just give it a little Google and buy it that way. That won the 2021 Victorian Premier's Literary Award for Poetry. And these days he lives between the page and the stage. I'm not quite sure what that space is, but I have no doubt that David has found it. After David, we'll hear from Evelyn Araluen, who is a poet, researcher and co-editor of Overland Literary Journal. Her widely published criticism, fiction and poetry have been awarded the Nakata Brophy Prize for Young Indigenous Writers, the Judith Wright Poetry Prize, in fact I think she won first and second prize one year, a Wheeler Centre Next Chapter Fellowship and a Neilma Sydney Literary Travel Fund grant. It's also just today been announced that she was shortlisted for the Judith Wright Calanthe Award for her collection Drop Bear. And something that I love about Drop Bear, I was reading one of the many incredible reviews about this phenomenal collection, which again, I highly encourage you to read. And the person writing started off by saying, I don't really read much poetry. I have a terrible experience that I can remember of being in year 8 and having to read Edgar Allan Poe. And that really cut to the heart of a lot of what David and Annie talk about with Poetry Month. And a lot of people can trace their poetry kind of relationship back to bad experiences at school. But that's something incredible that Evelyn's book has done. You know, my mum was sending me messages about it, which is a really high review from where I stand, I think. But a lot of people that don't necessarily read poetry are excited by her book and they're buying it at bookstores. So if you haven't read it yet, please do. And born and raised on Darug country, Evelyn is also a descendant of the Bundjalung Nation. Really excited to hear from her. And following Evelyn, this lineup is just ridiculous, is Maxine Baniba Clarke, who is a widely published Australian writer of Afro-Caribbean descent. Clarke is the ABIA and Indie Award-winning author of over 9 books for adults and children, including the critically acclaimed short fiction collection Foreign Soil, and the best-selling memoir The Hate Race, the Victorian Premier's award-winning poetry collection Carrying the World, and the Boston Globe Horn Prize-winning picture book The Patchwork Bike, illustrated by Van T. Rudd. She's also an editor, including of Best Australian Stories 2017 and Growing Up African in Australia. Her forthcoming poetry collection is How Decent Folk Behave. And I really enjoyed many years ago engaging more with Maxine's work as well as a spoken word poet, well, as a poet in many forms, but she's a really incredible performer, so I'm excited to hear from her as well tonight. Now, unfortunately, Pai O is unable to join us in person tonight as he has an injury, but thankfully we have a video for you to watch if you're here joining us live or on the live stream. I had a lot of fun filming that with Pai O and was lucky enough to go into his house and meet his birds and have a look at his partner's incredible artwork. So really excited for you to see that as well. Pai O is quite a legendary figure in the Australian poetry scene. Born and bred in Fitzroy, a great chronicler of Melbourne and its culture and migrations, and a highly disciplined anarchist who worked as a draftsman for 40 years to support his art. He's currently editor of the experimental magazine Unusual Work, and the current issue has a really fabulous cover image. In fact, he said when Anna had sent through this picture, he had to change the cover entirely because he was so excited about putting it on the cover, so get yourself a copy of that. And a pioneer of performance poetry in Australia, as well as the author of many collections, including Panache, Fitzroy Poems, Big Numbers, New and Selected Poems, and the 2 epic works, 24 Hours and Fitzroy, the Biography. His book Heidi with Giramondo won the Judith Wright Calanthe Award in 2020 and was shortlisted for the Prime Minister's Literary Award for Poetry in the same year. Really epic work. Excited to hear from Pai O. And Vidya Rajan has been asking the question, what is poem? So we'll find out some of the answers to that later on tonight as well. I feel like a lot of the people that we hear from tonight really ask the question, what can poetry do? You know, thinking about poetry, is it a tiny little machine that can actually make real change in the world? And I feel like they really bring back the resounding answer, yes, it can. And so Vidya's work is a really welcome kind of introduction to some of that conversation, I feel, in what is poetry? What, if it can do things, what actually is it? She's a cross-disciplinary artist and has been a recipient of the Wheeler Centre's Hot Desk Fellowship and the Melbourne Festival's Directors Lab program, Screen Australia's Developing the Developer Initiative. That is really hard to say. Let me try once more. Developing the Developer Initiative. Good. And Film Victoria's Plot Twist Games Writing Workshop. I'm not going to list all of the many achievements that Vidya has in this bio, except to tell you that she is really freaking funny. So I hope you enjoy her contribution to tonight as well. I'll be back with you shortly to close out the night, and I hope you enjoy the second set.
Hi, my name's David Stavanger. I'm coming to you from Araluen land where I live, and just want to acknowledge any First Nation poets and people of this area and tuning in tonight. I'm going to be reading a couple of pieces from my collection Case Notes. This first piece is called Octonaut. Every time scientists go into the midnight zone, they find a new species. My son is telling me this as he picks at his hands as if they're locks to release. Every time I'm with my son, I'm in that pitch dark, so familiar and unknown, looking for the luminescent when the lamp goes out. Walking across a footbridge, he tells me water is harder than concrete. Someone jumped from this very bridge last week. My son wants to know if he knew that fact before he leapt. I'm not sure what he knew. My son tells me even if he survived the fall, he wouldn't have been able to swim with broken limbs. Sometimes in the midnight zone, there are fish who pass by like sparklers, segmented worms, the snorkel masks of parents trying to understand that which breathes below the surface. All these specialists measuring depth. I don't know what my son sees when he swims alone. I know my son does not live in a world of perpetual darkness. I know he has colossal dreams. He's too tall for his strange thoughts. I don't need a doctor to use the word complex more than once. Every time scientists go into the midnight zone, they see someone's child floating like a lantern, reading alone in the corner of the sea's bed, waiting for experts to name their light. And this second poem I'm going to read, I dedicate to all the psychiatrists I have loved before. Glossary of terms. A facade of symptoms, a flutter of hospital wings, an angel of mutterings, a strain of thoughts, a masturbation of facts, a clinic of nights of dissent of human rights. A swarm of discords and a ouija of voices and a cult of rubber gloves, a pitting of loves. A stiffness of eels, a glaring of desks, a gloaming of fields, an intrusion of cockroaches, a tar dive of tongues. A business of ferrets, a business of flies, a school of leashes, an eye of pupils, a lag of appointments, a spell of steel darts, a strapping of skulls. An insertion of drips, a gaze of mirrors, a mission of blood texts, a flux of prescriptions, a pursuit of nurses. A residue of childhoods, a borderline of parents, a prickle of pants, a constipation of asses. A shipwreck of elephants, a dopamine of dogs, a comorbid of hopes, a concern of others, a jab of acronyms. A skulk of knuckles, a repeat of currents, an eerie of circular lights, an upset of skins, a troubling of neighbours, a clown of happiness, a drool of prescriptions, a boil of hawks. A bloat of stomachs, a mute of selectives, a seroquel of sounds. A mute of selectives, a valprate of hyenas, a cackle of foils, a brood of moods, a bed of anaesthetists, a labour of sweats, a bouquet of pigs, a warrant of zevons. An unkindness of selves, a crash of libidos, a dispenser of sardines, a shudder of spiders, a stake of wolves, an outbreak of sheets, a boredom of ticks, a turn of turns, a delusion of knots, a blessing of Valium, a dry mouth of dawns.
Jingiwala, I just would also like to extend my respect, my acknowledgement and my honour to the Kulin Nation and to their ongoing custodianship and care for this place over which sovereignty was never ceded. I'm going to read two poems. The first one is from the aforementioned Drop Bear. Thank you for the very generous and lovely introduction to that, Izzy. It's very lovely. In the spirit of poetic collaborations, this is written in response to the work of Sean Bonney, who is a British Marxist poet that we sadly all lost in 2019. It's called For Power, for Prayer, for Promise, for Peace. In the absence of power, say we will not forget. In the thoughts and prayers, say we will not settle for silence. To those who are coming, we promise we will not leave. If there will be no justice, we will not permit peace. The bloodied face of history is black, is bruised, spilling from a mouth that won't swallow its own tongue. The face of history is a death mask smothered against beautiful black, is a bullet to the back, is a body to the wall, is holy, like howling to forever that the sky has another star to burn. The prayer for peace says second to send grief to the soil, but first to take it back. Says there are some things too hallowed for forgetting, too much of history to forgive. The fury, the gun, the cell, the throat, nothing more holy, nothing more left to lose, no Lord, no glory, only the blood back to the earth, only mothers weeping to the street, only... The poem says, speak the aftermath of history. The wall says, fuck the police. The cry on the street says, say their names. Against every ceremony we trace to journey them home, say the word that will bind them here until we might let them leave with justice. If you say forgiveness, let it be without a knee to a neck. The next poem I'm going to read is slightly difficult. It's tricky. I wrote a work in collaboration with Anahera Gildea, who is an incredible poet from Aotearoa, and it was a really gorgeous and stunning process. I loved it. I learnt a lot. It was such an honour to be able to collaborate with her. But I would feel incredibly uncomfortable reading Anahera's words, and as our poem was so interwoven, what I'm going to read is part of the poem you don't see. We each wrote poems and then we wove them into each other. So this is a poem called Dinda, and it turned into a different work in that collaborative process, but this is what I started with. The auntie outside the church tells me she once held my sister's hand while she wept when the plane crossed Bundjalung. In her stories, the gum tree is holy like the other kinds of holy. I understand her the way this new city makes me dress strange, demands things from a body that knows it's not where it's from. Most things are adjacent to rivers, the reflection of root and branch, the failure of nation, our studded inflections as we practice the old words our grandfather was never taught. My sister's friend tells her the names of lakes that are healing, has a photo of us at NAIDOC 2 decades ago, squinting into sunlight. When I drive to visit the scar trees, my phone lights up with their names as they tease each other for pulled faces and crude cut fringes. After 9 months, I fill every corner of the house with mattresses. When I took that flight, I studied the pattern of rivers and searched for spines. I watched the window in a triangle of memory, map and word book. Stars, stars, stars. Balanyonala, Gila Duganda. The river Milky Way runs between the mountains. Stars, stars, stars. My sister taught my dog to swim in the river her namesake bruised into the valley we know like each other's hands. Most things are adjacent. Some are woven together, like the basket she made that sits by my bed in the new city. I know nothing more holy. I have my father's feet and my mother's mouth. The auntie said she would have known me anywhere by my sister's eyes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maxine. I want to thank David and Annie for putting this together. I think putting a literary event together is always difficult, but when you're dealing with poets, it's probably more difficult than most. And they've done an extraordinary job. And thanks to all of the other poets, I think if we can come together at a time like this for poetry, then hope is not lost. The first poem that I'm performing this evening is called Generation Zoom. I used to perform without paper, and tonight's the first time I've thought, can I remember my poems or not? I'm getting a bit too old to be doing this. This is Generation Zoom. In the third week of the pandemic, schools started closing, workers were sent home, and they started to call the youngsters Generation Zoom. Named, of course, for that video app all of them seemed to use. Logging in for FaceTime, connecting maths lessons online, dancing TikTok feeds on loop, and everyone was asking, what on earth will become of WhatsApp's children? Visiting friends through cracked iPhone glass and advised to stay away from their own mama's arms, who weren't allowed to warm, to touch. 'Cause don't you know, there's a virus going round, and less is love, baby, less is love. Parented from 1.5 meters away. What hope the future when a whole generation grew up this way, socially distant, quarantined, and self-isolated. No giggly schoolgirl notes tucked into the pockets of square-checked tunics, or that exquisite stomach churn you used to get when someone you liked stood close to you. But Generation Zoom, they saw the neighbors from 2 doors down slip a note in the letterbox asking if they still had food. Generation Zoom streamed bitter fights in supermarket aisles over toilet paper and baked beans, but they also saw us learn how to grow the world from seed. How the cities, silent, were so beautiful. How for the first time in so long, Dad was home, and he vacuumed and forgot to act like dinner was his due. And all the family were on the same time frame, in the same house, defrosting bolognese and bickering and bunking in. Elijah's boyfriend was finally allowed to phone, even though Mum was still confused about the whole gay thing. 'Cause don't you know, there's a pandemic going on. And love is love, Ma. Love is love. See, in the end, we'll be okay because Generation Zoom grew up today. Learning stocks can be lost as fast as accumulated, that health is wealth, and love is gold, and life will find a way. So the last poem is the poem that I was commissioned to write for Poetry Month. And I got really excited because I saw a little child running around before, other than one of my own who's in the audience. And I actually wrote a poem for children. I was thinking a lot about nursery rhymes and the way a lot of nursery rhymes, like, Ring of Rosies, which kind of deals with a pandemic, and Old Mother Hubbard, which deals with poverty, and thinking about creating nursery rhymes that tell of today's ills for the next generation. So this poem is for primary school kids, so not my target audience, but I'll give it my best go, and it's called TikTok Dance. Dab, dab, shuffle, slide, left, right, left. Shuffle, slide, dab, dab, twirl, kick, step. I learned to dance off TikTok. I taught it to my friend. He taught it to his neighbour, who taught it to his nan. She taught it to her butcher, who taught it to his sis, who taught it to her nephew, who danced like a boss. Dab, dab, shuffle, slide, left, right, left. Shuffle, slide, dab, dab, twirl, kick, step. The nephew went to my school. He showed it to the class. They did the dance at lunch on the oval on the grass. Dab, dab, shuffle, slide, left, right, left. Shuffle, slide, dab, dab, twirl, kick, step. The teacher came over. She smiled and scratched her head. She joined in the TikTok dance. This is what she said. I made a little dance last night. I taught it to my friends. They said that we should share it to see if it would spread. My husband took a video, uploaded on his phone. We put the dance on TikTok. It went viral, now I know. Dab, dab, shuffle, slide, left, right, left. Shuffle, slide, dab, dab, twirl, kick, step. Learn a dance off TikTok. Wasn't very cool. Turns out it was made up by a teacher at my school. She put the dance on TikTok that went viral in our town. Next time, I'll come up with a dance of my own. I'll put the dance on TikTok and I'll show it to my friend. He'll show it to his neighbour, who'll teach it to his nan. She'll show it to her butcher, who'll teach it to his sis, who'll show it to her nephew, and he'll dance like a boss.
40 million people worldwide in 2019 were subjected to some kind of slavery. 61% of them were used in forced labour. 25% of them were children, mostly in the private sector. And 38% of them were in forced marriages. You were given, we were given, we're being given, you'll be given, you were bidden, they were giving, I was hidden, we were being bidden, they were bidding, you were being bidden, they are bidding, they will be bidding, you were beaten, I was hidden. It was forbidden. You were forbidden. We were forbidden. We will be beaten. You will be given. I was given. I was beaten. I was growing. We were growing. They were beating. You were hidden. You were being beaten. I was bidden. You were given. I was beaten. You will be given. You were bidding, you were holding, they are holding, they were beaten, you were beholden, while I was being beaten, I was broken, I was being broken, I was broken, I'll be broken, I'm being broken, you'll be broken, you'll be sold, I'll be sold, you'll be sold, they are selling, they are bidding. We're being sold. I am being sold. I was sold. You were sold. We're being sold. They are selling. I was there. I was listening. I saw them selling. I saw them bidding. They were listening. I was listening. They were bidding. You were silent. I was silenced. I was beaten. You were being beaten. I was bent and bleeding. I was bleeding. I was frozen. You were holding. I was holding. You were frozen. I was frozen. They were bidding. You were being bidden. They were bidding. I was being beaten. You were being beaten. I saw them. I saw their pictures in the archive. There. Poetry educated me. It gave me a place to exist. It gave me access to a community. It gave me time. It made me sane. I could exist in it forever, like mathematics. Poetry incorporates the whole body. The problem is most people think it only occupies the brain, and if they have to, the mouth. They rarely include the ears. As Nietzsche once said, thinking involves the muscles. My struggle in poetry is to somehow come to terms with the sheer volume of material bombarding me, to somehow crush it into a small ball of language. This project made me visit some old notes on slavery that I had, and to mould it into something that somehow resembled what went through me when I saw that picture. Too often, when a poet wants to write, they rely on their emotions, then forage around for an iPad or pencil and begin to write. The problem with that is that most of what comes out seems to be far too familiar and all look alike. From my perspective, don't start with the emotions. Start with a reservoir of language, and out of that, construct whatever will allow you to construct. And 9 times out of 10, it'll say what you wanted to say.
Poem.
This is a poem.
This is a poem.
This is a poem.
This is a poem. A poem. A poem.
A poem.
A po. Oh. 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 Oh.
N.
Poem.
Poem. Poem.
Yes. Yes, sure, okay.
A
poem. Poem. Po.
This is also.
Po. Oh.
Yes, it's a yes. Poem.
Poem.
Yes, it's a yes.
Every.
Yes. And I couldn't help but wonder, if everything was a poem, how do we even know what other things are? Are there other things in the world even? Am I a thing? Is this me speaking? If anyone can write everything and everything can be anyone, then how many blips are blops? What I mean is Mr. Big's blops? What I mean is, doesn't this way anarchy lie? How do we even know what is good and bad? And if we don't know that, if we can't create a system for that, then when I force people to tell me I'm their favourite person all the time, how can I even believe they mean it? We need standards in this world, don't we? Or else we're all just floating along doing whatever. And how win big prize and how get things done and how, like, even know stuff. And I know history and decentralise, yes, and the power structures and the taste is an issue. You must not police, like, no gatekeeping, that's bad. But hello, you're just going to let raccoons in the gate? Raccoons in the gate, they'll eat your cake. And then I couldn't help but think, oh God, someone show me the way. Mr. Big is dead. And I couldn't help but wonder, wouldn't it be nice if there was just someone who could set the limits of things so I know where I end? Never gonna give you up.
Bet you weren't expecting to end tonight getting rickrolled. Thanks, Vidya. Can we give a huge round of applause for everyone that's in the room, and go on live stream, people, go off. What an incredible bunch of performers. I am jazzed after that. What an incredible beginning to Poetry Month. It's running all the way through until the end of August. Huge thank you to the Wheeler Centre and to Red Room and Hares and Hyenas up the back, who are selling copies of tonight's performers' books if you're here in the room. And as I said, live stream people, you don't get off the hook. You can order them on the internet. For the rest of the month, you can tune in to Poetry Month through the Red Room Poetry website and expect to find mountains of metaphors, stacks of similes, and a plethora of poets featured, as well as the chance to enter our 30 and 30 writing competition yourself every day. We hope to see you on the internet. Huge thank you again for being here and for tuning in. See you soon.